In the dark shadows and in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast, we are the brave and bold. Many scholars were fully aware of the global form of the earth in the time of Columbus, who, according to early historian state documents and his own son, was not an Italian of humble station and uneducated, but was a Greek prince with an excellent classical education. It was from a Greek port that he sailed on his celebrated voyage of discovery. He was accompanied by a mysterious stranger, which has suggested that Columbus was an agent of a society of unknown philosophers. This pattern of the democratic ideal was beginning to assert itself over the tyranny of decadent aristocracy. A new world was necessary for a new idea. And when it was necessary, it was discovered. And this is from Manly Palmer Hall's The Secret Destiny of America, Chapter 8. Giddy up.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Hey, greetings and welcome to the American Sermon. I will be your admiral for this journey. My name is John Towers. This sermon is a spinoff of it's a limited series spinoff of my podcast called the Abracast. If you like the topics like we're talking about this evening, I would highly recommend it to you. You can find it wherever you get the finest podcast. Off the bat, I wanted to mention we're going into this examination of history sort of morally detached. I've been trying to figure out different ways to say this through these last episodes. There might be some triggers that I might pull here, but we're going through this in like the headspace of like a Johnny Cash song. You know, bad people sometimes do good things, and good people sometimes do bad things, and sometimes people just do stuff on accident. I'm not putting anyone on any hooks, and we're certainly not letting anyone off of any of the hooks. So let's go ahead and get started here. With all that being said, tonight's featured book is The Secret Destiny of America by Manly P. Hall, which I already mentioned here in the cold open. So I think that I'm older than most of my listeners. I know that's hard for you guys to believe because I'm so spry. But I remember being taught the story of Christopher Columbus in school, and I remember being told that they were looking for another way to get to India to save time or whatever. But like that's not what it was about. I mean, it was about getting to India, but it wasn't about saving time. So, this ties into so much stuff that we talk about on the regular show lately. The spice trade routes had become very important. It linked Asia, Africa, and Europe together. And I actually had to look at this because I thought that Asia, Africa, and Europe were all 70s and 80s, bands. Asia is, And I think Europe is, but Africa is just the song, you know. I bless the rains down in Africa. All right, so cinnamon, ginger, pepper, and other spices came from India into the Middle East, and they would be traded and brought into Europe. So the Middle Eastern, the Arabs at the time, they're Arabs all the time, I guess, but these Arab traders would bring it in, and then they would keep it a secret. So the Europeans wouldn't necessarily know, you know, they were keeping their function as a middleman very protected. And the Europeans would come in and do trade with these Arabs on the spice trade routes, and the spice was flowing. You know what the stage. Okay. Spices were an important component to ancient commerce well before the 15th century, but they were monopolized by centuries by Middle East and Northern African middlemen who guarded the Asian provenance of their valuable source closely and became fabulously wealthy for it. Back then, these colorful grains were used for flavoring food, but also such tasks as making perfume, embalming the dead, preserving meat, and sprucing up salve recipes. Arab traders were in charge of conveying goods via the Levant and the Venetian merchants to Europe. But you see, there was a giant problem on the horizon. The Ottoman Empire had tried to get Constantinople many times. Islamists, the Muslims tried to get Constantinople for hundreds of years, but we're specifically talking about these Ottomans. So so 1390 and 1402, they tried a blockade. They sieged Constantinople in 1411 and also again in 1422, unsuccessfully all times. But here we go. On May 29th, 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire after a 53-day siege. Mehmed the Conqueror swiftly made Constantinople the new capital of this Turkish Empire. And, a song was born. In a position of power, the Ottoman Turks cut the spice trade routes in 1453. Overland routes helped the spice trade initially, but maritime trade routes led to a tremendous growth in commercial activities. During the high and late medieval periods, Muslim traders dominated maritime spice trading routes throughout the Indian Ocean, tapping source regions in East Asia and shipping spices from trading emporiums in India westward to the Persian Gulf and to the Red Sea, from which overland routes led to Europe. And we all know what the Stage 3 Guild Navigator would say. The spice must flow. I'm a bit of a Frank Herbert nerd, so I'm sorry for all the Dune jokes. So, So when we look into the history of the United States, and we think of we bounce it up against Islam, a lot of people, myself included until recently, I guess, thinks that the earliest involvement would be the slave trade. And then again, when Jefferson was president, the Barbary Pirates episode, which you can go to if you want to unpack that. If you don't know what the Barbary Wars were, you can go to abercast.com. There's a featured topic link. If you just go to probably in the Muslim expansion category or whatever, there's at least one episode all about the Barbary Wars. So I was kind of I don't want to say shocked because I see these connections and everything all the time, but I was pleasantly tickled, I guess, to see that the reason the North American continent was discovered was because these Europeans were running away from these Muslims, the Ottoman Turks, to be a little bit more politically correct, I suppose. So this move, along with I'm talking about the cutting off of the trade routes by the Ottoman Turks, that move, along with improved shipbuilding and navigational equipment, the emergence of Portugal as a world power, which we're going to get into in a little bit, and certain papal bulls, which we're going to get into as well, because this part of it is fascinating to me. And this Italian or this Greek, I don't know, 50-50, probably Italian sea captain, the age of discovery was born. And this set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to the founding of these United States of America. So let's get a little context here. These Muslims and the Jews were kicked out of Spain, where the Muslims had been in charge since 711. And you're like, what? Literally, just head over to the Abercast. The feature topic link will get you all sorted out. With this, the Muslim conquest, and then the Umayyad Caliphate and so forth, Grenada hung in there until like 1492. In 1491, the entire Iberian Peninsula was finally under Christian rulers, and they start kicking out the Jews and the Muslims and forcing them to convert, so on and so forth. And no one expected the Spanish Inquisition. The Muslim issue, however, for Europe was not settled. The problem is that they had these trade routes established over the last, hundreds of years. Marco Polo and others had gone to China for spices and dyes and rugs and silks and all this shit and other stuff. The journey was long, and these land routes crisscrossed into dangerous terrain, mountains and deserts and shit. But dangerous not just for your safety, it was also dangerous politically and religiously. These routes went through what is now known as Afghanistan, India, Iraq, and Iran. So these routes were exposed to the kings and tyrants of the Ottoman Empire. There would also be a strict taxation involved. Hold on, I gotta resituate here. There were these battles in North Africa against the Moorish power, where Portugal was trying to defeat these Muslim invaders and reclaim some of these sea trade routes. Globally, Western civilization was divided into somewhat of a race, right? It was Catholics versus Protestants. This is all in the the Reformation, and they were all trying to work around Islam, I guess. And in the years to come, there was a series of these papal bulls and stuff issued where the Pope sort of claimed savages just by waiting to be converted to Catholicism. So to get into these in a little bit more in depth, in 1302, there was you guys have probably heard me butcher a lot of languages up to this point, but here we go. This is me butchering Latin. In 1302, Unum Sanctum, it was issued by Boniface VIII. It created the first express trust in history for the whole planet, which means this bull lays down the dogmatic propositions on the unity of the Catholic Church and the necessity of belonging to it for the eternal salvation. This position of the Pope as supreme head of the church, the submission to the Pope is needed for salvation. So it's getting crazy. Up in here. Y'all gonna make me lose my mind up in here. In 1455, the bull's called Romanus Pontifex. It was written by Pope Nicholas V. It's the first testamentary deed and will. It's the first crown over land. What that means is the crown of Portugal is granted dominion over all the land south of Cape Boudoir, Cape Boudoir in Africa. So think about how important this is. Anything, shaky geography. Everything south of this spot in Africa now automatically belongs to Portugal. It repeated earlier papal bulls, enslavement of non-Christian peoples. It was all about stopping other Christian nations from infringing on Portugal's rights of trade and colonization of these regions. In 1481, Attorney Regis, which is written by Pope Sixtus, is the second testamentary deed and will, and the second crown of people as permanent slaves. Eternal kings. That's what Attorney Regis means. It's the granting Portugal all further territorial acquisitions made by Christian powers in Africa and eastwards to the Indies. So, to me, this is all amazing, and this is I would believe that this is a great motivator for Portugal to reach out to try to find, savages, I guess, or reach out to find other things. I own a bunch of shit on the other side of the horizon. I just got to go out there and find it. So, Schweikart Allens writes this great book. I own it, and I love it. And whenever I talk about history, specifically American history, I, refer to it. So I actually should probably put this in the featured book link as well. It's called A Patriot's History of the United States of America, from Columbus's Great Discovery to the War on Terror. So Schweikart and Allen, in their book, though, they write in chapter 1, because their book starts with Columbus's Great Discovery. So in chapter 1, they write, ironically, one of the smallest of the new monarchical states, Portugal, becomes the first to subside extensive exploration in the 15th century. Well, I think we just figured out, I think we just recast the word ironically, at least in part. I could guess why all this exploration was being funded, but that's just me. So in 1492, Christopher Columbus, with 3 ships and like 90 or 100 dudes, took off, looking for a way to circumvent the Muslim control of these spice trade routes. Columbus left Spain in August of 1492. His men almost lost heart when there was a threat, and there was always a threat of mutiny, apparently. On October 11th, 1492, they started seeing signs of land in the water. So, I didn't read through Columbus's journals, but, according to the stuff that I did read, there was signs of land in the water. So what that means is the water slightly changes color because the, soot or the dirt or whatever is closer to the surface of the water. And also they started seeing debris. I would imagine also it's like, if you're I always have this memory in North Ridgeville, Ohio, as a kid at McDonald's, going through the drive-thru and just seeing like this mass of seagulls everywhere because we were close enough to Lake Erie, I guess. So they were like, "Hey, bro, seagull bros, I know where to go to get French fries. Let's just go here." So I imagine there was like, you could see like more bird activity because the birds will go farther out to like get grub, I suppose, on the water. So they started seeing signs of land, and on the 12th, Columbus and his men waded through the water and stepped foot onto Watling Island in the Bahamas. They eventually continued to Cuba. Columbus called Cuba Hispaniola, and he called the natives there Indians because he thought he had landed in India. He sent scouts out to find the Great Khan, but no Khan ever responded to Columbus. Columbus started his return voyage home to Spain, still thinking that he had found a new passage to the Orient. Now, when we say Orient nowadays, we think of Asia, but back then, Orient... Actually, until very recently, Orient was like anything in the East, like professor of Oriental Studies, where they were actually teaching like Egypt and Babylonia and like fucking Iraq. So I find a discrepancy here. There's a splitting of the historical account. Some say reality dawned on Columbus during his second voyage in 1493 when he was not in the Pacific Ocean. He admitted that he stumbled onto a new landmass, perhaps even a new continent, of astounding natural resources. However, there was a guy named Professor... He's not a guy named Professor of History, but he was a guy, and he was a professor of history in Kent State. His name was Matt Crawford. And he says, however, that Columbus, to his dying day, never fully admitted that he had found a new world. The Portuguese had given him money, titles, and lands to find India. So Crawford explains that Columbus gets a bad rap for being duplicitous, or he's a fibber. So if he's steadfast, like, no, bros, I found India. But in other sources, he's like, I actually found a whole fucking other continent. Like, he just didn't want to lose his lands and his titles and all this shit. Like, I could see that, I guess. So, after the first two or three trips, other Spanish explorers started coming over in waves. There's this guy, Vespucci, who, on the other hand, it seems like he would tell anyone who would ever listen to him that he found a new world. He effectively launched this great PR campaign. So, in 1501, the Italian passenger on a Portuguese vessel named Amerigo Vespucci, his name, the ship's name was not Amerigo Vespucci. The dude's name was Amerigo Vespucci, and he wrote these letters to his friends back home describing this new world. And his letters were circulated before the news of Columbus, causing map makers and geographers to name the new world America, rather than Columbus or Columbia. So we got into a little bit of this stuff last episode. So if you're like, what is he talking about? And you haven't listened to the last episode, go back and listen to the last episode. We're going to talk about this guy who wrote these, drew up these maps or whatever, this geographer. Hey guys, John here. We are launching our first contest. It's called the Vessel of the Art giveaway, and we're giving away a fine glass mason jar with the Abercast logo on it. I'm pretty excited about this. Will be some other swag for sure. Next time you apply the formula and you mix up your weapon of mass distraction to watch with the show, you could whip it up into this fucking bad boy right here. Right now, all you have to do is sign in to like the Abercast Facebook page and submit your email. You go to abercast.com, submit to the emailing list or the mailing list right there. And once you have those two things, you are entered. We're gonna start doing go live videos on the Abercast page. We've done a couple trial runs so far. We're gonna start doing more of them, and that's where we'll announce the winners. March 20th and April 17th so far. It'll be on there, but these go lives are going on quite often. Don't forget to sign into the mailing list. When you sign in the mailing list, you get access to bonus material. It's usually graphic components of the podcast. And like I said, when you like the Abercast Facebook page, you get access to these go lives and all that stuff that we're rolling out over there. Also, a notification that we have shut down our Patreon in the interest of fighting techno censorship across the galaxy. Oh yeah. America has finally been discovered again. But in this, instead of whoever, the Chinese or the Vikings or the Templars, who none of whom seemed to stick around for too long. This time, for better or for ill, these guys were going to start sticking around. So who was Columbus anyways? Just a poor boy from a poor family? Sparing his life from this monstrosity? From Genoa, Italy? That is the official story, right? We spoke on the last episode briefly that he might have been some sort of underground Templar or someone who had access to their secrets and might have ended up with this map to North America. We sort of got into this idea that mainly P. Hall and others have this theory that Greeks or others knew of the location of America. Manly Hall states that there are many Greek mythology stories that have hidden clues to the existence of America. On to the secret destiny of America. We're going to start talking. We're drilling down into this. This book, by the way, is fascinating. I've tried to space this stuff out. So this podcast, I mean, it is not all about this book, but this book is a great resource for the show. So if you're interested in any of this and you want to unpack it, the Secret Destiny of America is great, and we're going to just get more and more into it as we go. As stated earlier, this is the book. As stated earlier, there can be little doubt that the Greeks were aware of the existence of the American continent long before the beginning of the Christian era. If information is not general on that point, it is equally surprising on how little is known about the man Christopher Columbus, who was accredited with the discovery of the New World. The date of his birth is unrecorded. And 20 cities claim Columbus as a native, so many legends have sprung up about this strange man that it is difficult to distinguish fact from fancy. In 1937, a little book was published entitled Christopher Columbus Was a Greek, according to its author Spiros Kantaras. The real name of Columbus was Prince Nicolaus Yislav. Oh boy, here we go. I'm going to try to do this right. Prince Nicolaos Ypsilantius. So we'll see. Look it up. Let me know how I did in the comment section. And he came from a Greek island of Cheerios or Kaios. I don't know. Greek is not my strong suit, everybody. I've butchered Latin. On this podcast, I've butchered French. Now I'm butchering Greek. The statement is backed up by quotations from numerous early histories and state documents. The author of this little book has documented his opinions in matter to bring joy to the critical reader. He mentions the following Greeks who navigated the Atlantic Ocean in ancient times. Okay, so we're like, wait, what? Greeks navigated the oceans in ancient times to America? Which one of these Greeks did this? Hercules, Coloius, Plithymus, and Odysseus. He points out that the language of the ancient Mayans to the American continent contains many words of pure Greek belonging to the Homeric period. And to quote the book, years ago in the Republic of Uruguay, South America, were discovered traces of the army of Alexander the Great. Swords and thoras with the inscription Ptolemus Alexandroi were found. All modern research on the life of Columbus tends to prove that he was not a man of humble station, poor, uneducated, and the story of Queen Isabella and her jewels is rapidly becoming recognizable as fiction. Columbus is emerging as a man of impressive personality with marked abilities as a leader, an organizer, and an excellent classical education. I lost my fucking place. Like most Greeks of his time, he admired the writings of Plato and the other classical philosophers, and he had the Greek birthright of legend and tradition, and he was mentally well suited for interpretation of classical lore. There is much to indicate that Columbus was inspired for his voyages by Plato's account of the lost Atlantis. And the records of early navigation to the west. Furthermore, Europe was not without some knowledge of geography. In his day, there were many scholars aware of the spherical form of the earth. A great trade with Asia had long passed over the caravan routes in the Near East, as the Arabs, for the most part, were a friendly people. But with the rise of the Turkish Empire to power, most of these routes were closed to the infidel. And even the Crusades failed to keep clear the roads of commerce. It became even more desirable to discover a western passage to the Orient. One night in Bangkok. It was for this purpose that Columbus sailed, and not from an Italian or Spanish port, but for the Greek port of Mahoan. So, I want to put like a little something in context here. I want to add a little bit of flavor to this. Is that they're like, the Greeks knew how to get to America or whatever. So before the Greeks, there were the Phoenicians. And there's a lot of speculation nowadays that the Phoenicians made it to Michigan. And this is where the copper for the Bronze Age came from, was actually these ancient Michigan copper mines. So we're not getting into that a lot. It's been brought up, I think, like maybe one or two times in this limited series, and we're not going to expound on it. But you can find a lot of good stuff. Scott Wolter from America Unearthed and the Kensington Runestone has some good material on it. back to the book. It is astonishing how difficult it is to ascertain the facts of the celebrated voyage of discovery in the life of one so prominent in history as Christopher Columbus. It appears that history entered into a conspiracy to conceal the truth. Possibly an elaborate misinterpretation was intentional, for certainly the confusion began before the death of Columbus. His own son refers to his father as a Greek and has suggested that Columbus changed his name because of a religious or political pressure. But this is in the field of conjecture. Oh! Jesus. Then, too, in browsing about among old records, I have run across a dim figure involved in the life of Columbus. A strange man who seems to have served the explorer in die capacity of counselor. Nothing very tangible has yet come to light, but it is hinted that this mysterious person accompanied Columbus on his first voyage and was not included in the list of his mariners. He did not return, but remained in these West Indies. Beyond this, no further mention is made of him. The mysterious stranger is reminiscent of the black-robed man who guided the destiny of Mohammed. Were these obscure figures ambassadors of the secret government, Columbus being one of the agents through which the Society of Unknown Philosophers accomplished his purpose? So I feel like I need to qualify all this. In The Secret Destiny of America, Manly P. Hall suggests that in the background of history were the secret, a secret college of these philosophers. And they were, in the time frame that we're talking about, their organizing factor is Sir Francis Bacon. So just like in the last episode where we're talking about, these Templar secrets are driving these people to do these, to like make these giant discoveries. Manly P. Hall's theory is that there's this secret college of these philosophers that go through it. So we're going to hear a little bit more about this as we go on. I just wanted to give a primer for it for you guys, so you understand what he's talking about, these unknown philosophers, and all of this business. So back to it. It is my opinion that he was such an agent. The signature of Columbus, composed of letters curiously arranged and combined with the Kabbalistic designs, certainly convey far more than the inherent of the signature of a private citizen. The importance of Columbus in the larger scheme of things is to be estimated from the relationship to the pattern of his own time. Europe passing from obstruction of the medieval period was coming into the light of the modern way of life. The motion of the Renaissance had spread like an ever-widening ripples over the surface of the stagnant pool. Printing had been discovered. A mental emancipation of man from the tyranny of ignorance, superstition, and fear was gradually being accomplished, and the democratic ideal was beginning to assert itself over the tyranny of the decadent aristocracy. So we talk about that kind of stuff a lot. Now, instead of the tyranny of tyranny of illiteracy, now we're stuck in the tyranny of, I don't know what you would call it. I don't know what I would call it. The tyranny of attention span. Like, none of us are reading. None of us are reading and putting things in context. You know, we're in the tyranny of the 20-second Facebook news clip. We're in the tyranny of Late Night with Jimmy Kimmel. Back to the book. I know it's Kimmel. It's a joke. As the mental horizon broadened, the physical horizon extended also. The Crusades had broken up the structure of feudalism. Principalities were forming themselves into nations, and the tribal consciousness was disappearing from the theater of European politics. This progress was opposed at each step by vested interests, and the human mind was becoming aware of his own powers, in a motion of continuing irresistible force. A new world was necessary for new ideas, and when it was necessary, it was discovered. That which is needed is always near if man has the wit to find it. Oh my God, I fucking love that. This little bit was in the cold open. And I love it. The idea that a new world was necessary for this new idea. This running away from tyranny, this divorce of tyranny. You know, I wrote a book about this. It's called it's a fucking comic book, but it's called The Ages. It's a graphic novel, and it has to do with a lot of everything that we're talking about in this series so far. And, I mean, it's one of the reasons that we're doing this limited series. This American sermon is about this book. And I love it. This just rings so true with me. And then it ends with, when it is necessary, it was discovered. I fucking love it. Today, I haven't cried yet on this podcast. I'm a pretty patriotic guy, but I stayed away from weeping so far. All right, back to it. Today, we are again seeking for a new world. No longer do there remain undiscovered continents to serve us as laboratories for social experiments. So we are turning our attention to other kinds of worlds of thought, inner spheres which must yet be explored by daring navigators. Science in the last 50 years has discovered a new universe, the universe of the mind. The infant psychology has but to come of age for us to fully discover a new sphere, for new explorations of the science of living. These voyages of Columbus were followed by 2 centuries of enlarging our geographic knowledge of the earth. Explorers who sailed the 7 seas seeking wealth brought home knowledge. It released human thought from its Mediterranean fixation and accomplished the still greater end of breaking the power of the Mediterranean theology and the Mediterranean way of life. Men began to think world thoughts, began to realize that while the whole earth was one land divided into continents and oceans, it was still as a gigantic unity. Out of the global wanderings of stout sea captains in the little wooden ships, it was developed our so-called global thinking of today. The concept of a global world, or at least terms of geography, is our common inheritance. After 450 years, we accept it without question, but mainly to toy with the belief that we will accomplish something in terms of ultimates. If we can industrialize the entire planet, our world is too large for us to know how to use it. Excuse me, I'm sorry. If we have discovered much, the greatest voyage still lies before us. Our venture will be made into the greater ocean that lies beyond the boundaries of the unknown, and the new voyages will be made in laboratories. And the contrary currents will be the cosmic rays that move through the seas of universal ether. And we will inquire of each man that he make the long journey of discovery within himself, searching out the hidden place of his mind and his heart. As Socrates so wisely observed, all mankind lives along the shores of an unknown land. This unexplored world abounds in wonders and is filled with riches beyond the wildest dreams of old Spanish conquistadors. In this land beyond the sea of doubt, the wise men dwell together in shaded groves. And here, according to the old tradition, the scholar, the musician, the artist, and the poet, who make the discoveries that science and philosophy must later prove, have already found a better way of life. Christopher Columbus sailed his little ships for a land which, by the writings of ancient philosophers, he knew existed. And each of us, in the fullness of time, will make our own passage in search of a philosophically charted better world, to follow the advice of Homer, to prepare our ships and unfurl our sails, and facing the unknown, go forth the sea and find our own far distant native land. Fuck, man. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you were enjoying the series, and if you want to unpack some of the topics we talked about tonight, please check out abercast.com. There's a featured topic link, and you'll want to find the 2 Secret Destiny of America episodes for sure. And there's a whole section on the Muslim expansion. You could check out my books there, and if you dig the stuff that we've been talking about in the series, you might like my latest graphic novel, The Ages. There's social media links at the bottom of the pages. Hit me up and let me know what you guys think about all this stuff. I would love to hear from you. And while you were there, I don't know, grab a t-shirt or something if you want. And there is an exclusive mailing list stuff. If you subscribe to it, you can find the link on the website or in the show notes. There's exclusive stuff that I send you guys to support this indie content. Oh, wait, before I get into that, he mentioned the Kabbalah in this. I actually, in the feature topic links, there was a whole section on Kabbalah. So if you're like, what are you talking about? These marks are like the Kabbalah. His signature, when he returned from the promised land, when he returned from the new world, his signature changed to have Kabbalah. I don't get into that, but there's a ton of Kabbalah stuff available through the Abercast. I would personally like a 5-star rating and review if you have time and inclination. Everybody, don't forget about the American Sermon. You find it in a lot of good places, a lot of good pod places. If you're whatever pod catcher you pay attention to, whether it be like iHeartRadio or whatever, you can't find it and you don't want to download another one just to catch a show. Remember, you can always go to our iTunes our fucking YouTube channel. You go to our YouTube channel, the show gets put up there the day it gets published. So there is that. And don't forget about our Vessel of the Art giveaway. Right now, all you have to do is like our Facebook page, the Abercast Facebook page, and sign into the newsletter, and you're registered to win the sweet-ass mason jar and some other swag. And the mason jar has the Abercast logo on it. Again, it's called the Vessel of the Art giveaway. We're going to be doing announcing the winner on March 20th and another one on April 17th on a go live on the Abercast Facebook page. So check us out there. We're rolling out these go lives and we're doing it often. We're doing them often. So you're missing stuff out if you're not following the Facebook page. Don't forget to check out the website. There's social media links at the bottom, abercast.com. Sign into the mailing list. You get access to some bonus. Usually it's it's visual components or additional notes to the episodes. And, the Abercast Facebook page, the Abercast YouTube page. You could join us all there. Social media site, website, mailing list. That's it. All right. Out.